childhood. What are we really rewarding? What do we admire when we watch sport? Is it victory alone, or is it the path to victory? The years of repetition, discipline, pain, sacrifice, and hard work that make elite performance meaningful in the first place. This is one of the oldest and most difficult questions in sport. We celebrate athletes for their commitment, their training, and their refusal to quit under pressure. At the same time, modern sport has always embraced some forms of assistance: better shoes, lighter bicycles, improved nutrition, altitude simulation, biomechanical analysis, data-driven coaching, and increasingly sophisticated recovery science. So, where exactly do we draw the line between acceptable support and unacceptable artificial aid? The debate is often framed too simply, as if sport were a clean contest between natural talent and cheating. But the real issue is more complicated. Elite sport has never been purely natural. It has always involved training systems, tools, medicine, and technology. What sport tries to preserve is not the absence of assistance, but a certain idea of meaningful achievement, an achievement still recognizably tied to human effort, skill, and disciplined development. This is why the conflict between hard work and artificial means is so important. It is not only about drugs. It is about fairness, identity, the meaning of excellence, and whether sport should reward the athlete, the support system, or the enhancement itself. At the heart of sport lies a powerful moral image: the athlete who earns success. This ideal is deeply tied to training, delayed gratification, physical suffering, repetition, and gradual improvement over time. We admire the sprinter who shaves hundredths of a second through relentless training, the weightlifter who adds kilos through disciplined programming, and the marathoner who builds endurance through years of aerobic work. The World Anti-Doping Code describes the spirit of sport as the celebration of the human spirit, body, and mind, and connects it to values such as health, ethics, fair play, dedication, courage, respect, and the ethical pursuit of human excellence through the perfection of natural talents. That wording is important. It does not define sport as merely winning. It defines sport as a way of pursuing excellence. This distinction matters because hard work in sport is not just a practical method for becoming better. It is part of what gives achievement its meaning. If two athletes cross the same finish line, but one arrives through disciplined preparation while the other gains the crucial margin through prohibited pharmacological enhancement, many people feel that the achievements are not morally equivalent. That reaction is not only about rule-breaking, it is also about the idea that sport should reveal qualities like resilience, commitment, composure, and self-mastery. Artificial means become controversial when they seem to bypass, distort, or overpower those qualities rather than support them. So what counts as artificial means? The phrase artificial means sounds straightforward, but in practice, it is difficult to define. After all, modern sport is full of things that are artificial. Synthetic tracks are artificial. Advanced swimsuits are artificial. Carbon-plated shoes are artificial. Protein supplements, GPS wearables, cryotherapy chambers, and altitude tents are all artificial in some sense. This is why the debate cannot be reduced to natural versus unnatural. Very little in elite sport is fully natural anymore. Instead, sports governing bodies usually ask a more practical set of questions. Does the method undermine fairness? Does it threaten health? Does it change the nature of the sport? Is it accessible to all competitors or only to a privileged few? This framework helps explain why some aids are accepted while others are banned. Track and field accepted the fiberglass pole because it still preserved the essential skills of pole vaulting, and because the technology could, in principle, be made available to all. By contrast, many forms of doping are prohibited because they alter physiology in ways seen as contrary to the rules, contrary to health, and contrary to the meaning of fair competition. So the real conflict is not between hard work and any form of assistance. It is between hard work and those artificial means that are judged to replace, overshadow, or unfairly amplify human effort. When people think of artificial means in sport, they usually think first of performance-enhancing drugs. That is because doping represents the most direct attempt to alter the athlete's body in pursuit of competitive advantage. Instead of improving performance through practice, tactics, recovery, or legal training methods, the athlete uses pharmacological intervention to gain strength, endurance, speed, focus, or recovery capacity beyond what is permitted. The anti-doping argument rests partly on rules and partly on values. According to WADA, anti-doping programs exist to protect athletes' right to participate in doping-free sport and to promote health, fairness, and equality. The code also states plainly that doping is fundamentally contrary to the spirit of sport. Ethically, doping is often criticized for three linked reasons. First, it can create unfair advantage. Second, it pressures rivals to do the same, producing an arms race rather than genuine choice. Third, it risks transforming sport into a contest of biomedical manipulation rather than athletic development. This is why the issue of hard work matters so much in anti-doping discourse. The concern is not simply that doped athletes use help. All athletes use help. The concern is that some forms of help no longer function as support for effort. They begin to substitute for effort, distort effort, or reward a different kind of preparation altogether. Few cases illustrate this tension better than Lance Armstrong. For years, Armstrong was celebrated as the ultimate symbol of hard work, survival, and determination. A cancer survivor who returned to dominate the Tour de France and inspire millions around the world. His public image was built not only on winning, but on the story of suffering overcome through extraordinary discipline. But when systematic doping was later exposed, that story changed dramatically. The issue was not merely that rules had been broken. The deeper betrayal was that what had been presented as a triumph of grit and perseverance was in part sustained by EPO, blood transfusions, and organized enhancement. The scandal damaged not only Armstrong's reputation, but also cycling's credibility, because it suggested that performances widely admired as the result of extreme hard work were entangled with artificial physiological manipulation. This is why doping scandals feel so corrosive. They do not simply alter results, they corrupt meaning. They make spectators wonder whether what they admired was really human excellence or a hidden pharmacological system masquerading as courage and discipline. But hard work and enhancement are not always opposites. Still, the debate becomes more difficult when we move away from banned drugs and toward accepted technologies. Not every enhancement bypasses effort. Some actually magnify the value of effort by helping athletes train better, recover smarter, or compete more safely. Consider altitude tents and hypoxic chambers. These technologies simulate high-altitude conditions and may help endurance athletes increase physiological adaptation. Critics argue that this gives an unfair edge to athletes who can afford advanced equipment. Supporters respond that the athlete still has to train intensely and that the technology does not replace effort. It modifies the environment in which effort occurs. Or consider motion analysis, force plate testing, and wearable sensors. These tools can optimize running mechanics, monitor fatigue, and reduce injury risk. Few people would say they eliminate hard work. Instead, they make hard work more efficient. This raises an important philosophical point. Artificial means are not all the same. Some replace internal effort with external advantage. Others refine the athlete's training process while preserving the athlete as the central driver of performance. The moral difference may lie not in whether a tool is artificial, but in what role it plays in producing the performance. A powerful example comes from swimming. In 2008, the Speedo LZR Racer swimsuit became one of the most controversial technologies in modern sport. The suit reduced drag, improved body position, and was worn by a vast majority of medalists and world record performers at the Beijing Olympics. Its impact was so dramatic that it was later seen by many as a form of technological doping, and governing bodies moved to ban similar full-body polyurethane suits. Why did this matter? Because many observers felt the suit had begun to change the meaning of the competition. Swimming is supposed to test the athlete's ability in water, not the buoyancy and hydrodynamics of a near-engineered racing shell. The concern was that technology was no longer supporting swimming skill. It was overpowering it. This case shows that even non-drug enhancements can provoke the same moral worry as doping. When artificial means become too dominant, the public begins to suspect that the athlete is no longer the main author of the result. The debate becomes even more interesting with the Nike Vaporfly and Alphafly running shoes. Research and commentary around these shoes suggested they could reduce the energetic cost of running by about 4% on average, with estimated improvements in running speed of roughly 2.6 to 3.4%, depending on the athlete and model. That is a huge effect in elite distance running, where margins of victory are often extremely small. And yet, unlike banned drugs, these shoes have not simply been condemned as cheating. Why? Because the situation is ethically gray. Some analyses argue that the shoes do not produce a historically unprecedented leap in performance and can be regulated rather than prohibited outright. Others argue they distort fairness, especially when access is uneven or when one manufacturer gains a practical monopoly over performance technology. This example is useful because it forces us to ask a harder question. If a legal shoe can produce a meaningful performance boost, why is it considered more acceptable than a banned substance? Part of the answer lies in visibility, rule structure, and access. The shoe is external, inspectable, and regulatable. A drug acts internally, is harder to monitor, and directly alters physiology in more invasive ways. But the discomfort remains. The Vaporfly debate reminds us that the line between hard work and artificial assistance is not fixed. It is negotiated, contested, and shaped by rules, culture, and what each sport decides it wants to preserve. Another major challenge to the hard work versus artificial means debate comes from disability sport and assistive technology. The case of Oscar Pistorius brought this issue into global focus. His carbon fiber running prostheses triggered intense debate over whether they compensated for disability, restored function, or provided an unfair mechanical advantage. This was not a simple case of cheating. It was a case about fairness, inclusion, and the difficulty of comparing different kinds of bodies and technologies in a single competition. Scientific studies and legal reviews struggled with questions about stride length, energy return, and overall net advantage, and the Court of Arbitration for Sport ultimately ruled that there was not sufficient proof of net competitive advantage in the specific circumstances considered. This example is deeply important for teaching. It shows that artificial means are not always ethically suspicious. Sometimes they are necessary for access, participation, and justice. The challenge is deciding when a technology restores opportunity and when it changes the competitive relationship itself. In other words, sport does not only ask whether an aid is artificial, it asks whether that aid helps preserve a meaningful contest between athletes under rules the community accepts as fair. One of the strongest arguments against artificial enhancement is that even small advantages create pressure for everyone else to adopt the same methods. This is especially true in elite sport, where success and failure are separated by tiny margins. Once one athlete or team gains an edge, rivals may feel they must copy it simply to remain competitive. This dynamic is often described as an arms race. In doping, one athlete's decision is never purely personal because it changes the conditions of competition for everyone else. The same logic can apply to technology. If one team has access to superior equipment, biomechanics labs, AI-driven tactical tools, or proprietary performance systems, others may be pushed into escalating spending just to keep up. This creates a profound ethical problem. Sport is no longer just testing who is strongest, fastest, or most skillful. It may increasingly test who has the richest federation, the best scientists, the most advanced engineers, or the least restrictive ethics. At some point, the competition risks shifting away from athletes and towards systems of enhancement. That does not mean all innovation is bad. But it does mean every innovation must be judged not only by how much it improves performance, but by what kind of competition it creates. A balanced view must admit that some artificial means do not undermine hard work at all. In fact, many modern advances help athletes express hard work more fully. Nutrition science helps recovery. Rehabilitation technology shortens injury downtime. Data analytics refine pacing and tactical decisions. Safer equipment reduces needless harm while preserving the essential test of skill. The key distinction may be this: does the artificial aid support the athlete's labor, or does it replace part of what sport is supposed to test? A heart rate monitor supports training. A band blood booster directly changes oxygen carrying capacity in a prohibited way. A better running surface supports performance for all. A suit that drastically changes buoyancy may shift the event toward equipment advantage. In this sense, sport is not anti-technology. It is selective about technology. It tries, imperfectly, to preserve a contest in which effort, skill, courage, and discipline remain central. Beneath all the rules and examples lies a deeper philosophical issue. What is sport for? If sport is simply about producing the most spectacular possible result, then artificial means may seem attractive. Why not allow every safe enhancement and see how far human performance can go? But if sport is also about the kind of person one becomes through disciplined striving, then the process matters as much as the outcome. This is why hard work carries moral weight in sport. It is not just a method, it is a value. It expresses patience, self-command, and respect for the game's internal standards. Artificial means become ethically problematic when they signal impatience with that process, a desire not simply to improve, but to shortcut what gives sport its educational and moral force. At the same time, we must be careful not to romanticize pure sport. Elite athletes have never competed alone. They depend on coaches, medicine, equipment, institutions, and science. The challenge is not to eliminate assistance, but to decide which forms of assistance are consistent with the kind of excellence sport exists to honor. So, in the end, is sport about hard work or artificial means? The most honest answer is that modern sport contains both. It always has. The real ethical task is deciding when assistance remains subordinate to human effort and when it begins to take over the contest itself. Hard work still matters because it anchors sport to something recognizably human: training, sacrifice, persistence, and earned improvement. Artificial means become dangerous when they weaken that link, distort fairness, or make the athlete's achievement feel less like a personal accomplishment and more like a technical production. That is why anti-doping rules, equipment regulations, and technology debates are never only about performance. They are about meaning. They ask what we want spectators to admire, what athletes should be rewarded for, and what kind of excellence sport should represent. In every generation, the tools will change. New drugs will appear. New shoes, suits, sensors, prosthetics, and genetic possibilities will challenge old boundaries. But the central question will remain the same. When an athlete stands on the podium, what do we want that moment to mean? A victory of effort? A victory of enhancement? Or a carefully regulated blend of both? And how we answer that question will shape the future of sport.